Alright gang, so we're going to take a look at word gaps. Word gaps are one of our nonfiction signposts that we're going to be using, and basically what word gaps are, as we take a look down at the screen here, it says, when you are reading and you notice unknown vocabulary words or phrases, you should stop and ask yourself, do I know this word from somewhere else? Is it technical talk? More on that in a second. Can I find clues in the sentence to help me understand the word? The answers might help you decide if you need to look up the word or keep reading for more information. And so this is, again, it's a skill, it's a reading skill, it's something that a lot of you probably do already without even really thinking about it. You come across a word as you're reading and it makes you stop and think, it makes you pause, and you try and figure out for yourself, well, what does that word mean? And so we're going to be putting a little structure to this. Like I said, it is a reading skill, it's a thinking skill, it is a nonfiction signpost. We did one with numbers and stats, and now we're going to use one called word gaps. So I'm going to skip the directions here, but basically what you need to do is, as you're reading, it says, read the text below and highlight any signal words that you see. Signal words, those are basically going to be words that you don't know. So that's going to be unknown vocabulary, phrases you don't know, etc. And then complete the green boxes in the tables below as you read. Be sure to include the word gap word in your answers to the anchor question and a proper definition. And I'll show you how to find that proper definition. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read through kind of the first part of this article that we see here. We're going to go right up through end of day 1. I would encourage you to at least follow along, at least through these first couple of word gap words, just so you got a feel for what we need to do. And then if you're feeling pretty confident, if you feel like you know what you need to do, then, by all means, carry on without me. I'll be fine, I promise. So here we go. A Tale of Two Indias. Down a winding alleyway covered with trash and up a narrow staircase is a small 2-room apartment. This is where 14-year-old Sushmita lives in an overcrowded neighborhood of Delhi. It's one of India's largest cities. Her family is part of the huge wave of Indians who moved from poor rural villages to the city in search of better lives. Yet Sushmita's family still lives day to day. Her parents both work, and they struggle to make ends meet. Sometimes there's no electricity. The apartment has one bed, which Sushmita and her brother share. Her parents and older sister sleep on the floor next to them in the cramped bedroom. Just 12 miles away, on the eastern side of the city, 14-year-old Anirudh Joshi lives in another world. His neighborhood is known for its parks, a nearby shopping mall, and convenient access to Delhi's subway system. His family's apartment is situated on a quiet, well-kept street. They have an air conditioner, a flat-screen TV, and a family computer. Anirudh lives with has his own cell phone and likes to play cricket with his friends after school. I have everything provided for me, he says. Anirudh and Sushmita reflect the two sides of India today. On one hand, India's economy has boomed in the past 25 years. Hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty. Last year, a British think tank predicted that by the end of 2018, India's economy will surpass both France's and the United Kingdom in size. That would make it the 5th largest economy in the world. Alright, so with this first word gaps, the first couple that we're going to do together, you'll notice that the words, we've already picked them out. We picked out boomed and think tank, and that's because if we want to do a few of them together. And so if I were reading this, without having already picked out the words, we see in the sentence here, on the one hand, India's economy has boomed. And so what I would do when I come across that word, I would double click it to highlight it, and I would just click my little highlight button up here, and then I'd pick my highlight, and we can see that it is now highlighted, and then of course I would type it in the box here. But then I've got 3 kind of anchor questions that go along with the word boomed that are going to help me understand it. And the first anchor question asks me, do I know this word from somewhere else? Yeah, when I think of fireworks. Boom, right? Because when I hear the word boom, and I've come across it in other contexts, I come across it like, the sound of an explosion, right? Like fireworks exploding. Is it technical talk? A word that experts on this topic would use. And I don't really know if this one's technical talk. I'm going to say I don't think so, because I don't think this is actually technical talk. And we've got a couple of examples coming up here that are going to be more technical talk, and so you can kind of see what they mean. But when we talk about technical talk, think of it as almost like a textbook type of word, a word that you would find in a textbook. So would you typically only find this word, in this case, in a social studies textbook? Boomed, I don't think so. I feel like that's a word that I would see in a lot of other contexts, not just like a social studies one. Can I find clues in the sentence to help me understand the word? Well, let's take a look. So we were reading about how there's two different sides of India, and it says on the one hand, India's economy has boomed. Hundreds of million people have been lifted out of poverty, and a British think tank is predicting that their economy is going to become the fifth largest in the world. So yeah, there's quite a few clues that we would see, like out of poverty. That's a clue about what this word means. And then economy will surpass, and then also fifth largest. All of those are clues, right? All of those are clues, context clues, because we see that the economy has boomed. And so all of those are clues about what this word means. And so before I come up with a definition of this word, I just kind of really want to think to myself, like, okay, well, what does boomed mean? And if you ask me, I think boomed probably means that it like exploded, but in a good way, right? Sometimes we talk about how an economy has crashed and off the deep end like that. I think in an economy booming is probably a good thing. But we're going to look it up and we're going to get a definition of the word. And to do that, again, you can just double click the word and then you can right click on it and I can define it right here in Google. How handy is that? We don't even need to take out our trusty handy dictionary off the bookshelf, which is good because I'm in my dirty basement and there's no handy bookshelf down here. But if I click define boomed, and then it brings up my definitions here. And we see past tense, boomed, make a loud, deep, resonant sound, the thunder boomed. I don't think that is a fitting definition here because I don't think that the economy is making a loud, thunderous noise, so I'm going to read on. Or it could be a period of great prosperity or economic growth. Hey, that to me sounds a heck of a lot like a winner. And so I'm just going to go ahead and copy that definition because that is the definition of boom, a period of prosperity or rapid economic growth. Now, of course, if you didn't know what some of these words mean, like prosperity, you could also look up those words over here on the side. But that's not what we're after right now. And so that's really what you're going to do before we go on together. I just want to go through that first example, but notice we read, we highlighted any unknown vocabulary phrases, and then after we highlighted them, we answered all three of our anchor questions. Do I know it from somewhere else? Is it technical talk? And can I find clues in the sentence to help me? And then we looked up a definition, but we looked up the definition after we thought to ourselves, what do we think the correct definition is? Now, I'm not going to ask you to type what you think it means, but I do want you to think about what you think the word means, kind of on your honor system here, rather than having you type that out and then look it up and type that out. And then you're going to continue to do that. Now, on day one today, we've got think tank. That's another one that we've already filled out for you. Socialist and caste. So day one, we've already picked out the words for you because we really just kind of wanted to put those supports in there. And then day two, which is going to be obviously tomorrow, when you get into day two, you will notice that the words are missing. There are no words predetermined for you, and that's because you need to figure out what those words are. And so that's when you're really going to be keying in on this here and highlighting any unknown vocabulary, phrases you don't know, anything that jumps out to you. Now, one last quick thing before I go on to our next couple of examples and continue on. If you're sitting there and you're going, well, but Mr. Canton, I am a genius and I know all of these words. That's great. I'm really happy for you. That's awesome that you know all of these words and there weren't any word gaps for you in this article. Truly, I am happy for you. So what I want you to do instead is still continue the process, right? Still answer those questions. Do you know it from somewhere else? Is it technical talk? Are there any clues? Put a definition. I still want you to do that. But in terms of the words, I want you to then pick out words that you think might be word gaps for a lot of other people. So even if it's not a word gap for you, I want you to come up with what you might anticipate word gaps being for other people. And you'll notice as we go through, it's basically each section of the text we're looking for one more word gap, and then when we get down at the end on day two, there's just a few questions that you're going to answer. How has it changed your reading? What information surprises you? And what's one thing you're still wondering? So there you go. That's how we do word gaps. I'm going to continue on here and go through the rest of these and continue to kind of model this. So if you need a little extra practice or you just kind of want to work with someone, you're stuck with me. So here we go. We see that the next one that we have here was think tank, and that's right here. And so we're just going to go ahead and highlight think tank again, just like we did, because that is our word gap. Do I know this word from somewhere else? Nope. Right? I've never heard the word think tank before. So how would I possibly know that from somewhere else? Nope. And then the next one, is it technical talk? I think so, right? I think that is actually technical talk, because think tank, that sounds like a very social studies-ish term, and it doesn't sound like a term that is just kind of a generic term like the word boomed in our previous example. Think tank definitely sounds like technical talk, and that's like that specific like academic language that you would probably find in a textbook. Last year, a British think tank predicted. So in terms of context clues to help me understand the word, I do have a few context clues here, but I really got to dig deep. And one of them is predicted, and that's because there's this group, they're British, but it's a think tank, and they predicted that the economy, right? So they're predicting things about the economy. And so maybe a think tank is a group. When I think of a tank, I think of a container of something in this context, not like a fish tank necessarily, not a container of fish, but like a container in this case of thinkers, right? It's a think tank. So maybe a think tank is like a group of people that just sit around and think all day. I don't know, right? How am I supposed to know what a think tank is? I've never seen this before. And I've got some clues, and I've got kind of a rough idea that it might be this group that just sits around and thinks, but I'm just going to go ahead and highlight and use my old define think tank option. And as I do, we see that it is a body of experts providing advice and ideas on a specific political or economic problems. Well, hey, look at that! We did basically, kind of come up with what we think a think tank is instead of a group of experts. They call it a body of experts, but whatever. And that's exactly what a think tank happens to be. There are people in this world who get paid money to sit around and provide advice to the world. Not a bad gig if you can get it. You got to be a big wrinkly brain thinker, but hey, maybe someday some of you will be able to sit around with your wrinkly brains and provide advice to the world. I don't know. That would be pretty sweet. I would love to have a former student in a think tank. Let me know. Let's read on. But at the same time, millions remain stuck in the old India. For them, it's a place that's very poor, uneducated, and trying to make the transition to modernity. About 20% of the population still lives on less than $2 a day. India has come a long, long way when it comes to its economy, says Arubhav Gupta, an India expert at the Asia Society in New York, but it still has a long way to go. All right, so we've just got two more that we're going to do together, just this real short section, and then we'll be all done for the day. Bully for us. Modern India was born in 1947. That year it gained independence from its longtime colonial ruler, Great Britain. The British split the country into a Hindu-majority India and the Muslim country of Pakistan. For more than 4 decades after gaining independence, India's economy was heavily controlled by its socialist government. As a result, the nation made little progress in tackling its crippling poverty. Now, I already happen to know that socialist is one of the ones that we've identified, so we're just going to do it right in context here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and highlight that word. Do I know this word from somewhere else? Only from, I'm just going to put social studies classes related to government. Right? And so I'm just going to say, yeah, I do kind of recognize this word. I think it's related to government or to economics. Is it technical talk? Yes. And I'm just going to say I'm pretty sure it is, right? Because again, that sounds like a very social studies term and a very technical term. And then, the next question, can I find clues in the sentence to help me understand the word? The only thing I really see here is that heavily controlled by a socialist government. Heavily controlled sounds ominous to me, and that makes me think that like in this case, India's socialist government, that probably doesn't sound like a good thing. A socialist government, maybe it could be a good thing, but in this context, it doesn't necessarily sound like that. But other than that, I don't have a whole lot of clues about what a socialist government is or what socialist means. And so I can't even really make a guess other than it's a government that, is heavily controlling a society. And so I'm just going to go ahead and look it up because I'm not real sure what that one means. And as we look it up, we see, oh man, a person who advocates or practices socialism based on the principles of socialism. So my definition here doesn't really give me much to go on. And And so I'd probably have to like look up the word socialism if I wanted to try and get a better definition for it. And here I see it's a political and economic theory of social organization, advocates a means of production owned or regulated by the community as a whole. So I see this is one of those terms, that, I, as your teacher right now, I've got a pretty good understanding and can wrap my mind around what socialist means and what a socialist form of government means. But you, as a student who maybe doesn't have all the background knowledge that I do, you might be struggling with this. Even if you read those definitions, you still might come away and it still very much might be a word gap, right? Because, if we were to just, take that definition and put it in there and, fill in our boxes, we still don't necessarily know what a socialist government is. I will tell you that it's basically, in this context, it's a socialist government is a government. Think back to when we talked about our economic systems and our economic system spectrum, this would definitely be a government that is more on the command side of things, right? It's going to be more involved in people's lives, making more decisions about what to make, how to make it, and who's going to get it. And so that's really what this is talking about. It's talking about a government that really makes a lot of those decisions for its people, and an economic system that makes a lot of decisions for its people, as opposed to a market-based economy like we have here in the United States. And for our purposes right now, that's probably enough to know that we see that, to get an understanding of what socialist means in this context, because really this whole article is about, India and how there's like a rich side of India and a poor side of India, hence a tale of two Indias. And so this is just kind of giving us some kind of historic background on modern India and how they got to where they were. And all we really need to know is that, its government was very controlling. Let's read on. But in 1991, government began turning away from socialism. It loosened regulations, opened India to foreign investment, and adopted other free market practices. The economy took off, and since then, the ranks of the middle class had more than doubled. All right, so now here we see even more context clues that if we wrap back to this word socialist, right, now we really have a much better picture of what this word means, because we saw that socialist might mean heavily controlled, but as we read on, we see that it goes away from socialism, and as it goes away from socialism, we see less regulation, we see the economy taking off, we see free market. So now we have a better picture of what the word socialism means. And that is why it's important that you not give up when you're doing these word gap words. It's important that you continue to read on. It's important that you look up the definition, but it's also important that you continue to have like your word gap, word finding radar out there, constantly skimming and scanning and reevaluating, because now we definitely see that our discussion about how it just meant it was a very controlling form of government and a controlling economic system, as we keep reading and get more context, we see that yes, that's absolutely what that word meant, because we are now getting more context and more context clues. With 1.3 billion people, India has the world's second largest population. It's the world's largest democracy. Indeed, India is now seen by many as the other rising global power, along with China, that the United States will have to compete with in the decades ahead. While India has taken huge leaps forward, large parts of the population have so far been left behind. About half of the Indians who live in rural villages don't have toilets, and 240 million Indians lack electricity. Education is another huge challenge. About 25% of Indians can't read. That's approximately 325 million people, or about the population of the United States. Because it's such a vast country, the challenges are just greater in scale, Gupta says. India is also hampered by the caste system. This traditional social hierarchy dates back to the ancient origins of Hinduism, the country's main religion. All right, and so that's our last word that we have for our word gap today, and it's our last word for today, and it's our last part of the lesson for today, so let's knock this one out. Do I know this word from somewhere else? Again, no, that cast, I've heard like cast on an arm, but that's a different spelling, C-A-S-T. So C-A-S-T-E, definitely not something I've heard of before. Is it technical talk? I think so, right? Because it seems very peculiar to me. It seems like something that's very much related to India itself, or possibly, as we read, related to Hinduism itself. So it definitely seems like technical talk to me. And can I find clues in the sentence to help me understand the word? Kind of. It says it's got this caste system, and it says a traditional social hierarchy. Social referring to people, and hierarchy is, think of like a ladder, right? You've got a hierarchy, you've got a ladder, you've got the lower rungs are kind of the lower end of the hierarchy all the way up to the higher end. And so there are some context clues that help us. Social hierarchy. So there are some... let's spell that correctly. So there are some words. Oh my gosh. Sorry about that. So there are some words, some context clues that help us there, and then we also have where it says see the caste system, which is all the way down here at the bottom, for a little more just kind of info on it. But then in terms of a definition, I think it just kind of refers to like people's social status, right? I think that's what the word caste means. It just refers to their social status. Let's find out. Each of the hereditary classes of Hindu society distinguished by degrees of ritual. That gets deep, and then it goes on, members of the lower caste or a high caste, and then we see it synonym social class. So yeah, so it's basically a social class system. Now, rather than copying and pasting that entire definition there, which you could, I'm just kind of summarizing what that definition says, talking about how it's the different classes of Hindu society, social class system in India, traditional, right? Because it talks about how it's like this traditional form, right? It was hampered, this traditional social hierarchy. And so that's what I'm going to put in there for my definition. So there you go. There's your 4 word gaps. We did boomed, think tank, socialist, and caste. That's the end of day 1. And then tomorrow, what you've got, you're going to read each section again. And then as you read it, you're going to highlight the word that stands out for you and then complete the green boxes as you go through. And then you're going to complete the questions that go along with it at the very end of the article. So hopefully, these word gap skills and just kind of getting into the frame of, how to approach a word when you come across a word and you don't know what it means. Now, obviously, I get it. You could just, look up the word, right? I mean, you could just easily look up any single one of these words and you wouldn't, have to go through all this entire process. You could just highlight them and look them up. Yeah, I get it. However, as you become more wrinkly brained, these skills, these questions, these anchor questions, they're questions that you're not going to necessarily, write out answers to. They're just questions that you're going to do internally. And these are things that good readers, strong readers, that they do internally. Many of you probably already do this when you come across a word. You ask, do I know it from somewhere else? Is it technical talk? Are there context clues? Can I look it up, right? These are probably skills that a lot of you do already, but if not, these are skills that will hopefully, that we can continue to work on and that we can continue to sharpen. So I hope you're doing well. Let's get out there and let's make those brains wrinkly. See ya.